Okay, we're going to have a look at the news roundup. You should be doing this on your own every week, but this week is too good to miss. So, as we are mainly tracking the Republican invisible primary race, let's have a look at some of the stuff that's happened. So, as you'll see, most of the news is dominated by the announcement that John Boehner, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, is going to step down as Speaker. This is massive, and you can see here we've got lots of articles suggesting that the Republican Party is at war with itself. This is very relevant to the party's topic in terms of which of the two parties is more divided, because you can see here we have an internal struggle between what we call the establishment GOP, who are the more leadership style figures, and the Freedom Caucus or the Tea Party, who are the more ideological right wing of the party. Now, this picture is Ted Cruz, senator for Texas, and he's one of the presidential candidates running in 2016. As you can see here, within minutes of the announcement that Boehner was going to retire, John McCain was pleading for a ceasefire. Now, John McCain ran for the presidency in 2008 against Obama, and he's a moderate, he's a middle of the line Republican, very, very measured, more likely to do deals in Congress with Democrats. As you can see here, he's very much an establishment candidate. Let's stop fighting with each other. Now, establishment candidates want to win elections. They want Republicans in power at the top levels. The Tea Party don't so much care about that. They do care about that, but more they care about upholding their conservative principles. So where McCain might be willing to compromise on an issue like immigration, a Tea Party member would not ever compromise on such an issue. And so we have a split. As we can see here, Rubio, another candidate, announced his resignation. Okay, and movement leaders and activists see the downfall of the House Speaker as a coup that's been years in the making. This suggests that there's been a long-running division in the GOP. Here, look, civil war, in other words, is raging as much on the 2016 stage as it is in Washington. So talking about Republican division, we can definitely look at this 2016 primary, but we can also look at what's going on in Congress. Nice little angle here, Family Research Council's opinion. Now that, vitally, is one of the socially conservative pressure groups that has a lot of influence over these candidates. As we move down, guys, you can see you got Mike Huckabee, you got Bobby Jindal, and even Rubio, who many see as a potential alternative to Jeb Bush among the more establishment-friendly Republicans, sought to appeal to the huge segment of angry with Washington electorate. Now you see, the likes of Ben Carson, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Bobby Jindal, Mike Huckabee, they're going to be appealing to the angry with Washington electorate. Whereas guys like Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush are more centrist and establishment candidates. So the voters are very wary of these types of candidates. Have a look here. Led by Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and Carly Fiorina, the rest of the field is trying to tap into the anti-Washington energy. Okay, so we have a massive anti-Washington sentiment that generally makes Tea Party candidates do well. Okay, Trump, Carson, you can see up in the polls, whereas Rubio has been polling at around 6% so far. This division within the GOP is really important that you keep your eye on, because we're going to come back to it so many times. So this article shows that the 2016 candidates are split on how to deal with this, as well as the people in Congress who are perhaps going to be pushing for Boehner's position. Now, let's go over to the Hill. So we're going to go to the Hill, and if it works, there we go. And we're going to have a look at what's going on here. Fast track bill. That's Congress. Let's have a look. Huh. Jindal questions Trump's Christian faith. Let's have a look. Ben Carson, Donald Trump. So again, this is all the invisible primary. You can see here, guys, that the scrutiny in the invisible primary on the candidates that have declared they're running is very, very intense. They're all trying to knock chunks out of each other. And this time, it's the Louisiana governor, Bobby Jindal, polling pretty near the bottom, okay? And he is ridiculing Trump's faith. Now, that's important because Iowa's very socially conservative, and Iowa is the first nomination process. So anything that Jindal can do to damage Trump in Iowa is going to be a massive, massive boost in the invisible primary stage before it all starts happening. He couldn't name one verse. You can see here the emphasis on socially conservative values in the Republican invisible primary. And again, this is all the type of thing that's going to be tracked during the invisible primary. It's all of the media scrutiny coming down on these candidates. Let's go to that page because I think that's going to be interesting. We'll flip back to Politico in a minute. Let's have a look at some of these headlines. You got one from Trump. Got another one from Trump. Another one focused on Trump. Jindal's making a few lies. Upstages Trump. Carson. Now this is really interesting because look at all of their headlines. They're all Donald Trump. And why would you say that is? It's obvious really. It's because he's winning. So I think one of the significances of this period of time, this invisible primary, is that the person who is leading in the polls is going to be subject to a lot of media scrutiny. And that has the potential to break their campaigns. Like we said, Trump is winning and it's September. The Iowa caucus is not until late January at the moment, okay? So Trump has got to keep that together for all of this time, and he's already had a debate where he looked tired, he looked jaded, while Marco Rubio and Carly Fiorina started to rise in the polls. So I think we need to argue that candidates that can maybe keep a low profile at this point in the invisible primary are going to have an advantage, because at the moment I think Trump has started a marathon at a sprint pace, and I can't see him not making a mistake at some point. Now maybe the anti-Washington sentiment will carry him over, but at the moment all the media scrutiny is coming down on Trump, and it could break his campaign before the Iowa caucus even starts. That's a massive significance on its own of the invisible primary. Let's go back to Politico. Now, as we can see, Politico is quite heavily focused on what's happening in Washington with John Boehner. But let's have a look at their 2016 page. So, with South Carolina in play, Tim Scott handicaps the 26. So, Tim Scott's senator for South Carolina. Now, we're talking about his endorsement. Why is that important? Okay. If we read down, what we're saying is that after Iowa and New Hampshire, the contest is probably still going to be up for grabs. And the third state is South Carolina. So the freshman senator is being courted by contenders as varied as Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina, because as we know, they're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. So we're now focusing on the endorsement of a South Carolina senator because South Carolina is the third primary, or the second primary, third process overall. So again, the media scrutiny is vital. If one of them can secure the endorsement of Tim Scott, it might mean that they're going to win South Carolina, and that is going to be a massive, massive boost to their campaign moving forward. Interesting. Let's go across to the Democrats. So obviously, all of the emphasis is being put on the Republican Party at the moment because there's so many candidates knocking lumps out of each other. But What about the Democrats? Well, one of their donors, Tom Steyer, is saying that they need another debate. Because as we know, the Republicans have been much more prominent in the media with their debates. And so this guy wants the debate to occur before the Iowa caucuses in February, so during the invisible primary. Since the candidates in the Democratic Party understand that climate change is their greatest threat, and so they want a debate about that issue. But the DNC showed no willingness to budge Friday. Could host a candidate forum. It's interesting. Why might the Democrats be avoiding having another debate on this issue? Well, back in 2012, you see, Bernie Sanders, one of the candidates, wants more debates. But back in 2012, the Republicans held a lot of debates. And as we saw, Rick Perry did that excruciating oops moment. And a lot of candidates came out quite heavily damaged from all of those debates. So it might be that the Democratic Party are trying to limit the damage that they do to themselves in the invisible primary before they get into the real thing. And as we know, if we look at the primary calendar for 2016, we can contrast it very, very clearly with 2008, where there was a lot of front loading and Super Tuesday had 24 states voting. Now this time the calendar's a bit more spread out. And not only that, Super Tuesday's a bit later and there's only 11 states. And not all of these are confirmed yet, as you can see by some of these having died in committee. So the impact of that is that the Democrats are saying, well, actually, maybe we could have a debate between February 2nd and February the 20th. Now, the difference would be that you wouldn't have so much pressure to have a debate in the invisible primary to build your campaign for Iowa, because the states are more spread out. The idea is that when there's a lot of front loading, the invisible primary becomes more important, and therefore you have to do really well in that period of time, spend and raise lots of money, do well in the debates, but that will then take you in a wave of momentum to Iowa, and you ride that into Super Tuesday. Whereas if it's more spread out, maybe you can do stuff that's going to change your fortunes in these gaps of time. So interesting to see that the 2016 calendar is a bit more spread out. Maybe that will reduce the significance of the invisible primary. Maybe candidates that make a mistake in the invisible primary won't be ruled out. And another thing we need to maybe consider is that this year the Republicans aren't using a winner-take-all system of delegate allocation. So if you win the Iowa caucuses, you win some of the delegates, you win most of the delegates, but you don't win all of them. I think the parties have done this to try and stop the huge amount of influence that Iowa and New Hampshire have over the eventual nominee. So again, perhaps this system of winner takes most rather than winner takes all delegates is going to reduce the importance of the invisible primary. I mean, vitally, we saw Rubio trying to run under the radar in the invisible primary, and Rick Santorum did that in 2012. So this is interesting to see how this is going to play out. I think we'll leave it at that for the moment. I think that's how it's developing. If we do this once every week, then we can just keep an eye on how things are developing.